Charlie Hebdo, you may have seen, just released a couple hours ago, what the cover for this week's edition will be. There will be 1 million copies printed, plus, of course, many, many others that will be printed in other countries. The cover shows Muhammad, depicts Muhammad in a caricature, and has a placard that says, "I am Charlie," in French, "Je suis Charlie," which absolutely sanctifies free speech in France. If we believe that that is the only right that deserves to be sanctified, then we should definitely promote that first and foremost. I suspect that at a group that we're talking about ethics, there are many that are important, and it's not clear to me we're spending equal amount of time on all of those. The amount of support, we have more refugees right now in the world than at any point since World War II, 70 years ago. The World Food Program actually had to suspend its support for Syrian refugees in December because there wasn't enough money that was actually coming in. The willingness to prioritize support for educating, feeding, integrating these refugees into Middle East and European societies is vastly less than it needs to be. And it is kind of identical to Ebola, right? No one cared about Ebola until the first person with Ebola came to the United States, and then we were going to spend as much money as humanly possible. It was late. And was Guinea and Liberia and Sierra Leone getting the international support they needed? Of course they were not. And how many more people died as a consequence of that? And how much more did those West African tiny economies suffer as a consequence of that? And that is precisely what we are seeing with the Syrian and Iraqi and other countries' refugee situation across the Middle East and Europe. And does that mean that we will see much more radical Islamic violence in these countries? Yes, it does. Does it mean that we will see more populism in Europe to respond to that will itself be very damaging and very other-oriented in its violence? Of course we will. Just today we had record numbers in anti-Muslim demonstrations in Dresden, where there was also the firebombing in Germany of the newspaper in Hamburg yesterday, following their publication of these Charlie Hebdo cartoons. This is a deeply ugly trend that is structural across Europe. It will not be fixed. And furthermore, it is coming at a time when the Europeans are farther apart between the periphery and Germany in what kind of policies they should be putting in place. In the teeth of the Eurozone crisis, the economy, of course, looked much worse in Europe, but the politics were much better. They were aligned. The Germans, they were so aligned that the Germans were basically putting in governments in Italy and Greece to do the bidding of the European community. The willingness to support extraordinary austerity to ensure that in return there would be money granted by the Germans, by the Europeans, that would allow these countries to get back on their feet and become more sustainable. That happened. Now we're in an environment where austerity will be rolled back. If Syriza wins in upcoming elections, austerity will be rolled back. That doesn't mean Greece will leave the euro area, but it certainly means you're setting yourself up for another economic crisis. And if Podemos wins in Spain and is a coalition government later this year, the same thing. And is France going to be spending a lot more money on security going forward? Yes. What does that mean for their budget? Are they going to hit their targets? Much more problematic. Will the Germans respond well to this? I doubt it very seriously. So, unfortunately, the politics of Europe, grassroots up, top down from Germany, outside in geopolitically, are really toxic. And I haven't mentioned Russia. And the United States, as we know, is prepared to fight the Russians to the very last Ukrainian. I mean, that's been going on now for almost a year. But the Europeans, of course, are taking the economic hit here, not the United States, which is one of the reasons why the French and others, the Visegrad states, have been increasingly publicly opposed to sanctions. Hungary, Slovakia, Czech Republic. We've seen this from the Italians to a degree, from the Spaniards as well. Again, most directly from the French over the last few days. I suspect going forward, that's not going to get easier. It's going to get harder.